It was the worst mass killing in Europe since World War II, and the bloodiest episode in Bosnia's war. The massacre of 8,000 Muslim men and boys by Bosnian Serb forces, who were trying to carve out a so-called Greater Serbia, forces that had the backing of the Serbian government. In 2007, the United Nations found that while Serbia didn't do anything to prevent the genocide, it wasn't directly responsible. Now the Bosniak member of Bosnia and Herzegovina's tripartite presidency is appealing against the ruling.
Everyone needs the truth, even those who oppose it. A truth that will be written by experienced and impartial international judges.
The appeal comes just ahead of a 10-year deadline to challenge the ruling. In the original case launched in 1993, Sarajevo accused Belgrade of masterminding a genocide through widespread ethnic cleansing. Belgrade gave military and political support to the president of the self-proclaimed Republika Srpska, Radovan Karadzic. His forces were given a mandate to kill or expel all non-Serbs. 100,000 people were killed in 3 years of war.
This lawsuit had to be filed again, not only because of us, but because of our children. This is very important for Bosniaks, Serbs and Croats, and for all honest and good people.
We're convinced that this path will lead to long instability, and this long instability will bring no good to the citizens of Bosnia.
Mr. Izetbegovic will be solely responsible for the crisis that will arise.
A strong message about the political fallout this appeal may bring. Both Bosnian Serb and Croat members of the three-pronged presidency have opposed it, saying it's unconstitutional and will lead to instability in a country still deeply divided along ethnic lines and struggling with a stagnant economy. Serbia has also warned the appeal could destabilise the region, its foreign minister saying it is politically dangerous and detrimental.
Renouncing this revision for political reasons, renouncing the attempt to achieve justice and truth, bargaining with human suffering and genocide for political stability would be a catastrophic blow to the dignity of the victims.
Is this appeal against the UN's ruling necessary to help heal wounds and give final answers? Or will it push Bosnia's fragile political structure to breaking point? Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining us now is our TRT World correspondent, Soraya Lenny, who has covered the Balkans extensively and is actually on her way now to cover this particular story. Soraya, you've covered this extensively and you're following this closely. Tell me why this means so much to so many Bosniaks that the UN ruling 10 years ago was not good enough for them.
Well, quite frankly, the scale of what happened during that Bosnian conflict and the people who have been held responsible have been individuals within the Bosnian Serb leadership, like Radovan Karadzic, for example. Ratko Mladic is on trial currently at the moment, but there has been no head of an official state that has ever been held responsible for what happened in Bosnia. Slobodan Milosevic, as we know, the former Serbian strongman, died while in custody at the Hague. There's also been no state that's ever been held responsible. The Bosnian Serb entity is kind of a de facto state within the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's not actually a functioning state separate to this entity. Now, we know that regarding what's happened with the trial of Ratko Mladic, for example, new evidence has been presented in terms of the directives that he received and also that Karadzic may have received from Belgrade. This is why one of the reasons approaching this 10-year deadline for the appeal, the state of Bosnia has basically decided to go forward and appeal this. They think they have new evidence, compelling evidence that might change the court's mind.
And this is fascinating because even if there were directives from Belgrade itself, that Belgrade was a very different Belgrade to the Belgrade today. And this is what the Serbians are saying. They're saying, we are Serbia, a country in the year 2017, which is very different to the former Yugoslavia, which was tearing apart, so you can't hold us responsible. Tell me how strong their argument is.
Well, I mean, you are quite right. It is a very different country than what happened and the country that existed after the collapse of Yugoslavia, as it were. And obviously, Slobodan Milosevic is no longer in charge of Serbia. And even within his country, at the time when he lost that second run or the run of presidency after the war, people really did start to turn against him, his own people, the people that had previously supported him. So it's not as though Slobodan Milosevic always was held in such high regard, or that his actions during the Bosnian Serbian conflict were held in such regard after the ceasefire and after this war came to an end, of course, around 1995, and the Dayton Accords were, of course, implemented. It's a very different country now. However, there is an element within Serbia, including people like Vučić himself, who had been brought to The Hague and indicted over war crimes committed during that era, but had then had the charges dropped, and then he was released, and it was this ongoing fiasco. He is now back in Belgrade running for political office. There is a rise of the right, and these sentiments surrounding this Serbian nationalism that existed during that Balkans conflict. So even though it is a very different country, the leadership is different, there is also another element which many fear is quite dangerous. Many fear people are not showing genuine remorse in Serbia as to what actually happened during the Balkans War.
Serbia's Foreign Minister Ivica Dačić said this move to appeal was, quote, very dangerous. And within Bosnia itself, you have both the Bosnian Serb and the Bosnian Croat leaders saying this is not a good idea by the Bosniak leader. How real and how big is this fear that the fragile peace within Bosnia right now might unravel as a result of this appeal?
If you speak to people throughout the Balkans, there is obviously a concern that this is not heading in any kind of good direction in terms of stability. However, people are very, very war-weary. What they went through, the former Yugoslavia and the many entities it now obviously makes up, they went through some horrific, horrific times. So nobody wants to see a return to war. It's true that there are elements within the Balkans, particularly within the Republic of Srpska in Bosnia, and also in terms of the right in Serbia, who don't agree with what happened during the war. They don't agree with how it ended. They still maintain that Bosnia, or at least parts of Bosnia, are part of this so-called Greater Serbia, along with, for example, Kosovo as well. So many people don't want to see sleeping dogs lie, but by and large, I think a lot of people there just don't want to see a return to this kind of acrimony that could lead to further violence. But there is also a legal argument here which may prevent all of this from happening. Serbia, of course, is trying to join the European Union, and they have made made a lot of progress in terms of joining the European Union, at least trying to show that they've been very serious about stability, very serious about getting along with their former enemies in Bosnia as well. So this one thing, the European card, might actually be the savior, I suppose, of stability this time around.
Looking at some of the statements of the Bosniak president of Bosnia-Herzegovina, Bakir Izetbegovic, he said, quote, "To trade with human suffering and genocide for the sake of political stability would cause a disastrous damage to the dignity of the victims." And you have many Serbs saying, because he's the son of the wartime president, this is personal for him. Is that a fair accusation that they're leveling at him?
I I think when it comes to the Balkans and speaking to people, I think it's personal for everybody, quite frankly. I don't think there's anyone who hasn't been affected, particularly in Bosnia, and that goes for the Bosniak president himself. Certainly, I would say it's personal, but then, of course, beyond that, he is the leader of the Bosnian Muslims, and it is, I suppose, what many people want to see. They want to see an appeal in this case. They want to see Serbia held responsible or taken to task in some capacity for what happened during the war. And as the president's pointing out, I mean, he's doing what he thinks is right and what his people are asking of him.
And final question for you, Soraya. I know you have to catch a plane. There was a victory of sorts for families of the victims when they won against the Dutch government because those peacekeepers stood by and allowed Srebrenica to happen. So that was one victory. Would this then be final closure for the families of victims if Serbia can be held accountable for genocide?
Well, it's a very challenging and a very tough question, and it's a question I've posed to the survivors of genocide in Bosnia, including the Srebrenica massacre, people who had lost everything. They lost their husbands, their children, and have basically been left alone. And they say even though they welcome justice, they want to see people tried and convicted, the state of Serbia as well. They say there's absolutely no court sentence or any outcome that could happen in a court that's ever going to really bring them justice. They say around 25 years ago, they were sentenced to a life of misery, to a life without their loved ones, and there's no court case and no verdict, quite frankly, that could ever match the scale of the crimes that were committed.
Soraya Leni, thanks so much for that.